are live. Welcome, everybody. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Today is going to be day 3, State of Indiana versus Richard Allen. We're going to be breaking down the first 2 days and then go into what's going on today. I think it's about 3/4 of the way done right now. It's noon my time, but it's 2 p.m. there. So I believe they're going to go till 6 or close to that. So. And it seems they took a lunch early because for those that haven't heard, they were showing crime scene photos. So obviously the family members, I think they were made aware on Saturday that today was going to be the day that the crime scene photos were going to be shown to the jurors and the people there in the courtroom. So obviously a very tough day. So trigger warning. Of course, we're going to try to be as delicate as we can with the issue and topic. But we're going to go through a lot of stuff because some very interesting things to break down. The video, let me just pull this up here. One of the things, obviously, this video, very infamous video taken by Libby. Let me get this situated here. This is just kind of a long version of it, just looped. Anyway, there was kind of debate on whether this video was, because we know that Libby was taking Snapchat photos of Abby, obviously, the infamous photo of her on the bridge by herself as they were about 3/4 of the way crossing. And then it was kind of it was never really talked about whether this was, just a video or was it a Snapchat video. But I think it's clear now that this is just a video, and further supports my theory that back in the day, iPhone had some issues where it would send things to the cloud, but to save space, it would condense the video. So this particular iPhone that Libby had was an iPhone 5S, I believe. I have the same one somewhere in my closet. But that particular phone shoots, the highest quality is 720 at the time, whereas now we have 1080 and more. Yeah, so it would send it to the cloud and compress it, which obviously makes it look something like this if it's not extracted back to its original form, to 720. And what that can cause is not only do you get a very grainy video, but the audio as well is going to sound crappy. And the other thing is, if you can't uncompress it back to its original form, not only will the audio and video is crummy, but it'll actually can cause the audio and the video to desync. So we heard that the defense said, hey, well, we don't see his lips moving when we hear him talking in the full 43-second video. And so that tells me that this video was most likely compressed, possibly sent to the cloud, like I said. I remember looking this up. I mean, this was feels like 2 years ago. There was a little thing that you had to select that when you went to go to retrieve it, you would uncompress it. And obviously, if you didn't checkmark that particular setting in the iPhone, when people would go retrieve their photos or videos, it'd be in the compressed form. So I'm thinking that may be the case. But either way, I think that's what's going on here. But the good news is it sounds like they were able to enhance it, but it doesn't sound like they were able to retrieve the original video in its original form. But clearly, obviously, technology has progressed, and there was a motion today talking about the video, and clearly it seems like they cut it up into two clips, even though it's one 43-second video. They've got 2 clips that they've kind of enhanced. So it'll be interesting if we ever get to see that. But at the very least, we'll hear about it. But yeah. Misty says, seems like he's taller than 5'6". I don't really think so, in my opinion. I I think, he's wearing boots. He's got the hat. It's tough to say. He's got his head down. It all depends on the angle of where you're shooting the video. You always got to keep in mind, when you take schooling for, doing filming and stuff like that, there's so many different techniques. One of them, because I skateboarded for 12 years and we filmed ourselves, and of course I took schooling for editing and stuff like that. And there's tricks to make things look bigger or smaller just by depending on the what you're filming and the height of where you're filming it from. So obviously, if I were to take a picture of somebody, say 5'6", but I were to take a picture of them and I was, like on a ladder and taking a picture downward, or not even on a ladder, but if I was just standing up tall, kind of taking a picture kind of angled down, I could make him appear shorter. But if I were to take a photograph of that same person, but kind of lower to my knees or feet and up, obviously that person's going to look much taller. It's just kind of tricks that you can do with, cameras and stuff like that, stuff you learn. So anyway, lots to go over. Again, I appreciate huge shout out to my wonderful mods, because I will probably go like 3-4 hours tops, and that should be right when the court ends. But like I said, we're going to recap day 1 and 2. I've got, obviously, I am somebody that likes to do visual presentations, so I'll show kind of everything for those people that are not as familiar with the case. So let me get this out real quick, so I can read chat real quick. I'm just going to play a recap of just the story of Abby and Libby.
Good afternoon, everyone. We begin.
Oops, that's not the right one.
Teenage girls, Abby Williams and Liberty German, had made last-minute.
So I'm just going to play this 2-minute recap video real quick so I can just make sure everything's running smooth. And then we'll jump into day 1. There wasn't much on day 1, and then we'll jump into day 2. There's a little bit of interesting stuff on day 2 that we'll recap, and then of course we'll get into what happened this morning, and we'll get into more recent events.
Plans to go to the Monon High Bridge, which was supposed to be a teenage hangout with a historic trail and a really high old abandoned bridge. The two girls, who were best friends, just had a sleepover the night before and were excited when Libby's sister, Kelsey German, said she would drop them off as long as the two girls found a ride home, which they did. Although it was February, the temperature was nice for that day, and even though it was a Monday, they had school off that day. The two girls, Abby and Libby, would be dropped off just before 2 p.m., where they planned on only staying for a couple of hours. The two teens, Abby and Libby, would begin walking the 501 trail to the Monon High Bridge. As the two would approach the bridge, Libby, who had her iPhone, would take 2 pictures, one as they passed the first platform, and another which shows Abby looking down as she is crossing the scary, tall, gap-filled railroad tie. The girls didn't know it yet, but they were not alone. As a few hours would go by, the father of Libby, Derek German, would show up, but the two girls were not at the meetup spot. Thinking that the two teens just lost track of time, he would end up calling Libby's phone. The phone was ringing, but no one was answering. He would begin searching for the two teens, but when running into other people, no one had seen them. Eventually, the authorities would be called out, and this would lead to a search party looking for the two girls. But sadly, there was no sign of them on that first night of the 13th. With the search being called off late that night for safety reasons, it would be resumed early that next day. They brought in helicopters, divers, and many other resources to scour the area. But just around noon that day, they would soon discover a grisly scene. Authorities would discover the two girls across the river, and both had sadly been murdered.
Investigators solemnly identified the two bodies found in Carroll County as 13-year-olds Libby German and Abby Williams.
We would soon get multiple press conferences, including one of the most memorable statements by Superintendent Doug Carter.
We know that this is about power to you. And you want to know what we know. And one day, you will. A question to you. What will those closest to you think of? Two children. Only a coward would do such a thing. We are confident that you have told someone what you have done. Or at the very least, they know. Because of how different you are since the murders. I believe you have just a little bit of a conscience left. And I can assure you that how you left them in that woods is not what they're experiencing today.
I just unveiled the person that we believe responsible for the murder of these two little girls.
Excuse me. Okay. I can't believe we are finally here, and it's day 3. I never thought this day would come. And still, I get chills listening to that press conference by Doug Carter. Still gives me chills to this day, because just about everything he said, hiding in plain sight and everything like that. So let's get into it. So we're going to start with day 1, get into day 2. Obviously, there wasn't much on day 1, really just kind of the family. Let's see. It starts at 52:35. 52:35. Is that right? Or is it 50? That's what I have written down. 52:35. Day 2. I think this is the right one.
4/7.
Another job.
Information from them.
This is the wrong one. That's why it's not. How about I play day 3? That
Abby
will work.
Williams and Liberty German
There we
had
go.
made last-minute plans to go to the
Okay, 52:35. 52:35. 52:35. Here we go. All right, perfect. Okay. Hey, we got the captain, man. Honor to have you in here. Somebody who has covered this case and has presented some amazing theories and have covered this case with integrity. Amazing. Humble, always, to have you in here. So let's just quickly recap day 1. Just letting this kind of float into here. So quickly, obviously we had the opening statements. I'm not going to go over the prosecution because it was only 15 minutes. I think it was going to be a lot longer, but because they were supposed to have a video that was going to play. The defense went for an hour approximately, and usually, they have a allotted time. So I'm assuming they each were probably given an hour. So I'm assuming, because obviously a lot of people were kind of anticipating some bombshells, especially from the prosecution, myself. Maybe hearing a few statements from the confessions, maybe some new evidence that we haven't heard of. And I think there was probably going to be some of that in this video. And then for some reason they couldn't get the video to play. And so the prosecution only ended up obviously going for 15 minutes, McClellan, and just kind of giving the broad, picture of what happened. So a little bummed out on that. So obviously in the mini opening during the jury statement, they talked about a hair that was found in Abby's hand. Obviously, that got a lot of attention, and we found out that is just a female hair, and likely probably from Libby, because Abby was wearing Libby's sweatshirt, and we heard from Kelsey that they had washed that sweatshirt obviously with Libby's clothes, and it likely hair's got transferred fibers and stuff like that. They also claim the unspent bullet is bad science. This is the one that really sticks out to me. So, originally Alan said he was there from 1:30 to 3:30, which that, especially the 1:30 arrival time, is like spot on for when BG, Bridge Guy, arrived. I mean, it's literally spot on. So, in my opinion, I think he was telling the truth. Then after they did the search warrant and he was interviewed, he said he was there from noon to 1:30. But then in their defense opening, and I listened to a bunch of different people because obviously we don't have a transcript, but in that opening, they did say that he was there at the trails around 1:30 or until 1:30. But in that same opening statement, shortly later, they say that Richard Allen left in his vehicle at 2:15. So that was kind of like, whoa. Which I kind of shared, I think in the last live, why they may have done that. Because if he left at 1:30, and they said he parked at the CPS building. So obviously if he left at 1:30, he should have walked right into Bridge Guy. So I think now they're kind of extending that and having like a window saying, oh, he might have left as late as 2:15, which I don't know how, I don't know what he was doing for 45 minutes, but I just thought that was kind of interesting. And then, of course, they're going with the theory that Abby and Libby were taken by vehicle and then brought sometime earlier that next morning in between that window of 2 and 7:30, I believe. I got to write that down because we actually heard about that, I believe, today. So there was, would that be like a 5-hour window? But anyway, I think, to me, I sounds ridiculous. I don't know why you would abduct girls and then bring them back where the place that people are going to be searching for them. I can't wrap my head around that, and I'm really surprised that they're going that route. They also remember Sarah Kabba, which is the witness that saw Bridge Guy leaving. According to the defense, they said that he was, or the prosecution claimed that Sarah Kabba said that he was bloody and muddy, but according to the defense, they said that no, he was just muddy and he had a tan jacket, whereas prosecution said he had a blue jacket on. We also heard that the prosecution, this is one thing that I had to look and make sure that this quote was correct. One of the things that the prosecution stated is that, according to Sarah Kabba, she said that, yeah, he was muddy and bloody, and it looked like he had slaughtered a pig. And I had to double make sure that that quote was right, which, it's disturbing to hear, obviously, but I think, goes to show what Sarah Kabba seen when she was driving by. All right, so moving on. Yeah, CR says that would never happen. Take that back. Yeah, I always, think of, for those that are familiar with the Evansdale case, it happened, I believe, 2 years prior. Is it? I want to say 2015. Or no, it was 5 year. It was a 5-year difference. Excuse me. So 2017. So it would have been 2012, right? I think is Evansdale, because it was a 5-year difference or something like that. Same kind of situation. 2 girls, I think a little bit younger. But they were riding their bikes. They were at a park. they were abducted. They were taken, 20, 30 miles northeast and dumped in a huge forest. And I think if that was the case here, that would have been something similar. Then we had Anna Williams. I'm not really going to recap hers. Obviously, she just described, the day of and her last, words that she spoke to the girls. Obviously, very heartbreaking. And then we had Derek German. One of the things that the defense keeps asking a lot of people that are there, which is interesting, is they ask what kind of cell service provider they had, which is interesting. So I'm kind of curious to see where they go with this, because I'm seeing that with almost every witness, especially that's a part of the search party. Of course, Kelsey German. Move past her real quick. Obviously, she's the one that dropped the two girls off and then heard about them missing. Then we have Mitch Catrone. He was one of the first responding deputies to arrive at the High Bridge. He would actually speak to Brad Weber. And he said that Brad Weber appeared to be clean and not sweaty. I don't know why they mentioned that, but so it doesn't appear like he had just gone out and killed two girls and came back home. So, and then he searched for the girls on February 13th, but he didn't see anything, and I think he was on the south side, of course. All right, I'm going to pause it here so I can get to chat. Now we'll kind of get into more stuff, and I'm going to start showing visuals for anybody that's not familiar with the area, according to each witness, because there's a lot more on day 2. We got Lone Pony in here. Thank you so much. Appreciate your coverage now more than ever. So many others are so extreme and biased. It's frustrating. Thank you for the facts. Yeah, we stick with the facts on this case. We got Ruckus in the house. It's an honor to have you in here. Hope you're doing well, Ruckus. And thank you so much, Lone Pony, for the $4.99. I really appreciate it. Good to see you, Donna. Hi, Amy. I'd shout everybody out, but we got almost 500 people in here. Jennifer, thank you so much for the dollar super sticker, and thank you so much for modding and everything you do. Okay. So then we had Steve Mullins. So he was originally the police chief at the time, and now is the investigator for the prosecution. One of the big things that I wanted to touch on is they were shown drone footage of when they were going to the Monon Bridge from the Freedom Bridge to the High Bridge. And it was a 9-minute video. And so it was talked about that they claimed that it only took 9 minutes to walk from the Freedom Bridge to the High Bridge. But obviously that was not correct. So I went and double checked this, and it was fast forwarded double speed. So the jury actually asked a question after he was done, and they asked, how long does it take? And he said around 20 minutes. So I'm glad that was corrected, because the reports by some of the reporters claim that it was 9 minutes to walk from the Freedom Bridge to the High Bridge, which would really screw up the timeline. I might have to turn on my AC here in just a minute. I notice it's getting really hot. Then we have Jake Johns. He was part of the search on February 14th. He and another volunteer. They started at Riley Park. I'll show where that's at. And they were on the south side of the Deer Creek. he was with, I forget the name of the other volunteer he was with, but they started almost 2 miles west. And then they would work their way east, and they would work their way along the Deer Creek because they thought maybe the girls, because one of the things was that they thought the girls might have gotten injured because, of course, they knew that they were going to be on the high bridge. And so I think they thought, well, maybe the girls fell, or one of them fell into the river. And so they were checking downstream and working their way upstream, which I thought is pretty clever. And so, yeah, they were on the south side and would eventually discover Libby's tie-dye shirt, which was stuck on some roots, I guess on a log in the Deer Creek. So I'm going to show that, and then I'm going to turn on my AC because it's getting a little warm here. But here's where Riley Park is. Here's where the Monon... Oh, let me pause this real quick. Move that over. So they started, I think it's approximately 2 miles, and obviously they're zigzagging, so I would say that's a good 2 miles that they were walking. So they covered a lot of ground. And I forget the other guy's name that he was with, but they were basically on the south side walking along Deer Creek, checking to see if the girls were in the creek. And they worked their way all the way up to the high bridge, and then would eventually stumble across the tie-dye shirt. And then I think around that same time, of course, we had other searchers on the other side, and I think that's kind of around the time frame that they would start to find more clothing and then stumble across the bodies. Let me get to chat here in just a second. I just need to pause this right here. So I don't know if this is exact. This is just approximate, but I'm assuming the tie-dyed shirt would have been somewhere on this side here. I think some clothing was found on this side right here, but the crime scene's approximately here. This is just approximate, of course. But again, Jake Johns and another guy, they were on the south side. At some point, I was trying to figure out when this was. I'm assuming this is probably when they got over to that side, but I found this very interesting because this could be related to something, or it could be nothing. But Jake John said he found footprints on the access road, which is also the road for Brad Weber. They call it the access road or the private driveway. He also noticed, I believe, a large rock that had been dislodged near the hill. There's 2 hills. We'll look at them. And he noticed that it looked like it appears someone had slid down it. I thought that was very interesting. Now, the footprint did not actually come from Jake Johns. He was asked, I think maybe by the defense. He actually clarified that it was actually the other person that was with him that claimed to see the footprints. Actually, this was in an interview that they did in 2019 with him, I believe. So after finding the shirt, he and the volunteer tried to cross the creek because obviously I think maybe they saw other clothing or something, but they didn't have the proper footwear, boots. And then, of course, at the same time, or around that same time, they found Libby's Nike shoes. And then, of course, shortly after that, we would have Pat Brown that finds the body with Tom Mears. Here's what it looks like for those that are wondering. So that's kind of the approximate place of the crime scene. That's the bridge. This red line is the access road or the private drive that goes to Brad Weber's home. So obviously, Jake Johns was, on the south side checking the creek. So I'm not sure. It wasn't really clarified. I'm sure the transcripts would help out, but at some point they would be on this access road And that's when they had seen the footprints and what appeared to be a large rock dislodged that went down, and possibly somebody that slid down. And so this is somebody there. So this is the first hill. There's two hills. There's one hill that will go down to the access road. That's really steep. And then the same thing. As you can see, there's another steep embankment right there. So somewhere around here is where Jake Johns claims that there was the rock and where someone slid. So I don't know if that could have been one of the surgers from the night before, and because we know there was a lot of people on the south side, and that's probably why they didn't find the girls, and maybe one of them slid down. But there was also theorized that when Bridge Guy had ordered them down the hill, maybe when they were going down one of these hills, that maybe Bridge Guy tripped, or one of them, and they took off and crossed the river. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So let me get to chat for a second here. I think we've got Pat Brown, and then we'll get into obviously today, which obviously is going to be a little bit more trigger warning, of course. CR, thank you so much for becoming a member and supporting this channel. I appreciate the support. You are a legend. Thank you so much. Fire and Ice says, I don't get why so many news channels and YouTube channels talk as if the defense has all this bombshell evidence when they don't. They don't talk about the prosecutor evidence. Yeah, in their mini opening statement, they claimed, and it was such a shocker to hear that there's this hair clutched in Abby's hand, and, it doesn't match to Richard Allen. And it just goes to show that they write these big checks, and it sounds good. And of course, you make a YouTube video on that, it'll probably do pretty well. And then we hear days later that this hair was a female hair, and then we hear that the relatives of Libby are being grandmother. The DNAs are they're being tested. Their hair's being tested. So again, they bounced a check, and they've done that many times before. So. Yeah, I totally agree. Badass says, I know Richard Allen's brother-in-law was into motorbikes. Yeah, I remember we kind of were looking into that. Because, they found a motorcycle cover, and they mentioned that in the search warrant. Maybe he owned a classic Comet car and it broke down, so Alan's wife had to give it a jump. I'm sure this would just be my opinion. You got Delphi is a town of less than 3,000 people in 2017. I'm pretty sure, there's probably only one. If that owner lived in Delphi, I'm pretty sure they would be able to find the owner of a classic car like that with the population it has. Now, obviously, there's cities around that are much bigger that maybe that person's from, but I would think they would have probably found out who that person was. Maybe we'll hear about it, maybe not. But Wallflower coming in with the $20 super sticker. God bless you, Wallflower. Thank you so much for the support. I appreciate it. Heard that the young teen witness wouldn't have used the term walking with a purpose. I guess the only way we'll find out is when they testify, clearly. So the last person, is it the last person for day 2? I think it was, Pat Brown. He arrived on February 14th to help search with a man, Tom Mears. Obviously, we hear the Mears parking lot. They are connected. They parked at the cemetery, which I'll show. They went towards Ron Logan's property. As they continued towards Deer Creek on the north side, heading south towards the creek, they would come across, at first, what he thought was mannequins, but sadly these were the bodies of Abby and Libby. The bodies were found approximately 50 feet from the creek, and in today's hearing, we heard kind of what the square size of the crime scene tape and everything, so we'll talk about that. He would call, obviously, law enforcement, and then the defense, again, asked Pat Brown, what kind of cell service did you have? So while that's playing, that's the cemetery. So he parked somewhere in here and then continued. Obviously, we're on the north looking south. This was probably about an hour after they found the bodies, I'm assuming, where the helicopters were up. This is when they were obviously still trying to look for the girls. And that is Ron Logan's property here. So you have the cemetery, and then you have Ron Logan's property, which is here. It's a pretty big property. And we can see the bridge there. And the girls, the bodies would have been found kind of, look here, kind of where the curve's at. So kind of in this area here, of course, close to the creek. So obviously with them going here, I think they probably went to Ron Logan, asked him if he'd seen the girls, and then they probably went down and they we know that obviously they were on Ron Logan's property, and so if you slow this down, you can actually see where they start snapping photos, and you can actually kind of see the crime scene tape kind of if you play it really slow. But we're not going to do that. All right, then we got day 3. Obviously, trigger warning. They're going to talk about some of the officers who were first to respond on the crime scene, and of course, talk about what they observed. Zane says, I started watching previous videos. Yeah, I got to clear a lot of them up. I've got a lot of videos. I need to kind of delete some and organize them. I try to organize the playlist, obviously, but we've covered this case for 2 years, and it's still kind of surreal, and that we're finally here actually talking about the case. Mitzi Scott, thank you so much for gifting a Mob Crew membership. God bless you. Huge supporter of the channel, and thank you so much for modding as well. God bless you. Okay, so trigger warning. We are going to hear from Darren, and I'm going to probably butcher this last name, Giancola. I think it's Giancola. So obviously one of, so this is state's 9th witness. He's a detective with the Carroll County Sheriff's Office. Let's see. So in his statement, he said he went to search for the girls between the creek and Private Drive. Giancola said he could see the area at the end of the Monon High Bridge down the bank where leaves were disturbed and could see a swath of bare ground exposed. According to Giancola, the search ended around 2 a.m. February 14th. Oh, this is where there's the gap here. So obviously, I'm sure this is where the defense is going to, where they are alleging that the girls were abducted and then brought sometime before 4:33 because, which I don't know. It sounds ridiculous to me because I don't know why you would take the girls back, keep them alive, and then you're going to kill them. And you're going to move them around and put sticks on them, and you're going to do all this in the pitch black dark. But before you before you finish doing all that, you're going to take Libby's phone. So the defense is claiming that these killers knew that she had a phone. Instead of destroying this phone, they're going to turn it on, place it under Abby, and then, and then play sticks on them. And it just sounds, I'm sorry, it sounds really absurd to me. But yeah, so between 2 a.m. and 7:30, that's where they stopped searching. So there's a kind of a 5.5 hour gap there. Oh, thank you, Sandy. So trigger warning, of course, we're not showing anything graphic on this channel. But this is obviously, they're going to be talking about the crime scene. We're not going to get into the, very specific details, but obviously there are some disturbing things that we're going to mention. So just trigger warning for everybody. So, Gian Cullen said, we were told as members of the search party located something there, possible bodies. When he asked to describe the scene, Gian Cullen said one of the girls was naked. Obviously, Libby was naked. Abby was clothed. He said that both had noticeable injuries. Both had lacerations to the throat. Without getting too graphic, it's claimed that Libby had three cuts, two on one side and one on the other. Sadly, obviously, that it cut into major arteries, obviously, which is very fatal. With Abby, it appears that there was just one cut, but it was actually a stab, obviously, in the neck. Obviously, cutting major arteries, fatal. And so they both lost a lot of blood. He said when they found the bodies, they were obviously both dead. ISP, Indiana State Police, was called to the scene after the bodies were found. Crime scene tape was put up, and Giancola said he stayed at the crime scene all night till next morning to help secure the crime scene. So that just goes to show you, there was a lot of work to be done. They were working into the next day. And, there's the defense, is going to argue about this bullet and how it was handled. And, keep in mind this bullet. I don't know if they've mentioned it now. Maybe we'll hear it towards the end of today, which was found between the girls. But remember, it was in the ground. So obviously it's something they would probably found last. Gian Cullen said he didn't notice the bodies while he was walking to the creek, despite being 30 to 40 feet yards away from them. So I'm assuming when he was still kind of searching, I think they asked him, when you were at a certain 30 to 40 yards, did you notice anything? And he said no. During cross-examination, defense attorney Andrew Baldwin asked Giancola if there was blood on both girls' bodies, to which Giancola responded yes. Yeah, I think it was. I even remember that it was always kind of thought that maybe, like, if it was one person trying to handle two girls, that maybe, like, he, pistol whipped Abby and maybe knocked her out and then focused on Libby. I think that was kind of something that was theorized, and maybe it turned into kind of like a rumor that she had a head wound. I do kind of remember something like that. Oh, was it John Cola? Thank you. I was going to look that up. So, okay. So I've been butchering the heck out of it. My apologies. John Cola. Thank you, Alan, so much for correcting me. Good to see you, Stephanie. And thank you, Tabby. Oh, yeah. Captain Howdy. I mean, when I think of Delphi case back when, obviously we didn't went long before Richard Allen was arrested, and even before Kagan Klein, the videos I was watching was Captain Howdy, and I was just the way he put it together and the integrity of his videos were amazing. And very interesting theories, and built off the things that very little that we knew at the time. So again, the defense asked John Cola what cell phone carrier he had, and he responded with AT&T. So it seems like, as I said before, it seems like defense has been asking everybody that's been involved in the search what kind of cell service you had. I'm assuming because some services are going to work out there while others may not work at all, or are very spotty. Cola didn't take any pictures. I don't know if he's. You got to remember, each person has a role. He may not be the one that's there to take the pictures. That would be the crime scene tech people. He would probably observe and take notes. But that would be the crime scene techs. They're the ones that have the cameras, because, he's not going to be taking pictures of on his cell phone. I'm sure he'd get fired, I don't know if he'd get fired, but I think that's probably a big no-no. Unless, they're sending it to somebody. But again, I don't know how all that exactly works, but I'm assuming the crime scene tech people, sounds like he's just one of the first officers that were there, and he just helped. But here's just kind of obviously there's nothing graphic here. This is long after, the bodies have been removed, but you can kind of see the crime scene tape. It's believed the girls were kind of in this area approximately, so you can kind of get an idea, that it's a pretty heavily wooded area, even though it's February and the leaves are gone. It's, defense is always kind of claimed why didn't they find him on the first day? But by the time they were searching for these girls, it was dark because it's February, so it gets dark at like 5-6 p.m. So by the time they were officially searching for him on the first night, it's pitch black. So, and they were more focused around the bridge because, again, they probably thought the girls may have got injured on the bridge, and so they were more focused around that area. Excuse me. What about the rumor or theory about Libby talking to a man online and going to meet him that day? Sorry if this is old news. That is something that has been talked about for a long time, and then it was, especially when Kagan Klein came around, it is almost confirmed, more or less, that yes, Kagan Klein, who was kind of a person of interest, sadly a sick individual who was into some very terrible stuff. He was catfishing young girls, and getting pictures from them. And it was learned that Kagan Klein had spoken to Libby's friends. And then apparently, according to the detective in a transcript, the detective says that that you got a hold of Libby the morning of. So yeah, it was always kind of theorized that Kagan Klein had some kind of hand in this, or at the very least, the girls were lured out there through catfishing. But it appears that may not be the case, even though there were so many coincidences that involved Kagan Klein. A lot of them we would find out was because he just lied about a lot of things. So here's just kind of a graphic showing kind of where the girls were found, where some of the clothing was found in the creek. Again, just very rough estimate of where things were at. Under Abby's body was a shoe and Libby's phone, which was very interesting. We'll talk about that here in a second. So now we have state's 10th witness, Jason Page, a much easier last name that I can correctly pronounce. Let me take a sip here. It seems like he's been with the Indiana State Police for 24 years. He's a crime scene investigator for 16 years. So he's the one that probably, I'm assuming, took photos. He processed 900, up to 1,000 crime scene. Oh, I'm assuming throughout his career. So throughout his career, he's processed 950 to 1,000 crime scenes, including 100 homicide scenes. So obviously this guy is very decorated and experienced. Let me get rid of that real quick. So he arrived at the crime scene around 1:30 on that day, on February 14th, and met other 2 crime scene investigators. So I'm assuming we'll probably maybe hear from these other ones as well. Page referred to the crime scene as like a 30 square foot area where most of the physical evidence was located, as at ground zero. A diagram prepared by Page showed the location where Libby and Abby... Should have made that a little bit longer. Again, thank you so much. We almost have 700 people in here. God bless you guys. Please hit that like button. And, of course, those that are just coming in, trigger warning, we are kind of talking about the crime scene. We're going to be trying to do it as delicate and responsible and respectful as much as we can here. A diagram prepared by Page showed a location where Libby and Abby's bodies were found. Prosecutor attorney Jim Luttrell, who is obviously working with Nicholas McClellan, asked Page to show the jurors of the topography and landmarks on a digital map displayed on a large video screen. And we'll kind of look at my interpretation. Obviously, I don't have those, those photos, or, these are just some photos that were obviously released very early on of the crime scene. Obviously after it was processed. Nothing graphic, of course. So he describes some more stuff. There are a few things that we haven't heard before. Just a few little tidbits. Is court session from 9 a.m. to 5 today? It's either 9 to 5 or 9 to 6. And I'm sure it always just kind of depends on the witness at the end of the day, how long they're going for, and then the witness, because they usually try to end, at an appropriate time where there's a break between witnesses. So sometimes they may cut early or go a little bit later. I think it just kind of depends. No, they were. That's a good question, Alan, because he was using Snapchat and Yubo, and I think like one or two others. I'm sure somebody in chat could clarify. We've got John Fratz coming in with a $10 super chat. God bless you, John. I appreciate the support. For those that came in late, I will kind of recap everything once we get up to date. We're almost there. But I really wanted to give everybody, because this is a channel where we, I'd like to have visuals for, my presentation. Okay. Amy says, do we know if law enforcement got Richard Allen's cell phone records? So this is the issue, Amy. And that's such a great question. Remember, they didn't catch Richard Allen until 5 years after the crime had happened. So, sadly, now luckily they did a geofence. Now, geofence is where you're going to take an area around the crime scene, and the towers, the cell towers that are close to that crime scene, and you're going to geofence that area, and you're going to have a time frame. So, like noon to 6 p.m. on February 13th. Hours before the murder and after. And then in that area, they can see whose phones were, pinging in that area between those time frames. Well, we know, basically through the defense Frank's motion, we know that they would mention that Richard Allen, they never mentioned Richard Allen's phone is there. So, remember Richard Allen said he was on his phone watching stock ticker, but yet his phone is not there. So according to rumor right now, we just got to say this is a rumor, is that day, at least for the geofence, they have no phone records. The other thing is because it was 5 years, to go back to his phone records, Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, whatever, each one's different. They keep phone records for a certain amount of years. Sadly, 5 years is way too long. So they weren't able to go back, sadly, and get, his phone records for days prior and after. Whereas like Brian Koberger, since they were able to catch him right away, they're able to get his cell phone records. And obviously, they could go back many months. And yeah, so huge. That's probably a huge blow for the prosecution. Okay, continuing with Paige's statement. So, photos taken by Paige show crime scene tape, trees, with the girls' bodies barely visible in the distance, and the topography showing the girls' bodies. So, obviously, he's taken photos, various distances, close up, on a ladder. Paige explained to the jury what they were seeing in each photo. So obviously this was clearly very disturbing and heartbreaking, especially for the families. One of the photos showed the girls' bodies with black marks covering Libby's naked body. That's interesting. We've never heard black marks on her body. I don't know if that could be like dried mud, because it could kind of get dark black. I don't know. Or if that's like maybe the bruises. I'm not sure. If you know in chat what you think those black marks would be. That's interesting that they mentioned that. Paige took more photos from a ladder with the creek in the background showing the girls' bodies from a higher view. I think what they're doing here is to show how from certain angles maybe the reason why it was hard to find the bodies in the first place, because, remember, they're covered with sticks. And I'm assuming that's just kind of just to give, a visual of what it was like from various distances. Sadly, one of the jurors put their hand over their mouth as they were looking at the photos. Of course, the mothers, the families were crying. That's just really tough. Page said that the day the girls' bodies were found, the area was saturated still with a large amount of blood on the ground. Another photo showed blood-stained patterns on a tree on the other side of Abby's body. We'll kind of talk about that. That's what is known as the F tree, according to the defense, but we'll talk about that. Siegel, that is Bob Siegel from one of the reporters, noted that Page was very calm and methodical in describing the crime scene photos he had taken. Page said chemicals were used to search for the blood on the trees. That is probably the luminol, which obviously, is commonly used to search for blood that may be dried up and hidden. However, the chemical did not show more blood than what was visible to the investigators with their eyes. When asked to describe the Monad High Bridge to walk on, he said it was sketchy. And so this whole process took about 90 minutes, going over the crime scene photos and diagrams. So that's an hour and a half. The poor family had to sadly go through this. But I said yesterday or the day before, I would rather go through it, knowing that it's going to be a month-long trial and that these crime scene photos are going to be talked about and shown. I would rather get it over with quickly than have to, just like getting a shot from the doctor, just get it over with. Whereas, I would think it'd be much more excruciating waiting, weeks. Oh, that's right. They did use. Of course, I know they got leaked out. I never seen. I've had them described to me many times, or a few times. I should say many times. Yes, that. I thank you, Sensei. I think that's what it is. So, yeah, because Libby was naked. They redacted her certain areas, obviously, to be respectful. Thank you, Sensei. I'm surprised they didn't explain that, because the way it's worded makes it sound like there's like bruising or something. So I appreciate that, Sensei. That would clear that up. Okay, 42 crime scene photos were entered. The photos including everything from general area to close-up of Libby and Abby. The clothes Abby was in appeared damp. That's interesting. I'm sure the defense will definitely, dig into that, because that would mean, obviously their theory is that the girls were brought back on February 14th and killed sometime around between 3 and 4 a.m. So, that would kind of play along with that. There were bloodstains on both girls, on the ground and surrounding trees. This report is coming from one of the reporters. They added some things in that were in the blog. There were tree branches set up on what appeared to be a pattern. I kind of have an issue with the word pattern on top of the girls, but we'll go with it. Some were in V's or crosses. the V thing, I disagree with the V. I'm sorry. The V, to me, is kind of nonsense. And the crosses, I mean, because the way they're laid, we'll see a diagram of them. Obviously, it's just a drawing. But I disagree with the V's. So, murder suspect Richard Allen looked at the pictures as they were shown, but had no reaction to them. So, that's interesting. I was kind of wondering how that would have worked out. Would he have looked away? So, that's interesting. I'm going to get to chat here, and then if you came in late, I'll kind of recap some of the highlights, and we'll talk about the bridge guy video again if you missed it earlier, because it's something that me and a few others kind of were really interested on how this video got compressed and all this. But let me get to chat real quick. Obviously, this is what they originally claimed, or at least the defense claimed in the Frank's motion as the F tree. But we kind of have learned how it's really like an upside reversed L. And this came from, sadly, Libby. We'll try to be very delicate explaining it. Yeah, thank you, Dami. Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't kind of explain that in that. That's why I was kind of thinking, well, maybe it's like some kind of mud or bruises, but yeah, that makes sense. Amy, thank you so much for the $4.99 super sticker. God bless you. I appreciate you. And everybody in here, it seems like everybody's being very respectful. Charlotte asks, is Kagan Klein going to give evidence? Now, he's not going to be called by the prosecution, which I think shows that in my opinion, shows that there's no direct connection between Kagan Klein and Richard Allen, which was really theorized a lot. And it is quite shocking that there isn't some kind of connection. But yeah, the defense is going to call Kagan. And yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I have some ideas on where they may go with this, but yeah, GPS is so much better than geofencing. And that's why it's a bummer they couldn't get Richard Allen's phone records. But obviously it had been 5 years. I mean, I'm sure we could look it up and see which provider, but I think it's only a couple of years depending on the provider. Thank you so much, Sherry. I'm trying to do my best and be respectful because this is really a very sensitive day. All right, let me take a sip here, and we'll talk about the F tree and how we believe it was created. Obviously, that we've heard some experts explain it. Thank you so much, Carol, for the $10 PayPal. God bless you. You guys are amazing. So this is really what it was like. Now, yeah, you could kind of make like an F. If you looked at it from afar and you brightened it up, it almost appears like it's an F. But if you really see, what you really have is you actually have lines going down, and then you have this little curve. I'm going to play a little video and show kind of what they believed happened. Now, sadly, this is when Libby was attacked and sadly cut on her neck there. So obviously there's no full connections with the F. Again, remember the defense was kind of going the route with this oldness thing and that this was an F and it was painted out, but we know that that even they tested trying to paint an F, and it looks so much different than how you would hear. And you'll notice how it's kind of thinner here, but it's broader and wider out here. Obviously, a great former detective, Steve, had done that diagram there. So what they believe happened is Libby, likely, obviously, when she got attacked, natural reaction, you would grab your wound. Obviously, with a wound like that being very obviously detrimental, and an artery, a major artery being cut, she would grab, obviously, her throat, and then she would be by this tree, and of course, with blood on her hand, probably try to maybe stabilize herself, and they believe that her pinky kind of ran and made the L, so she kind of did something like this, and then maybe came in contact with it a couple more times, maybe leaving this little fingerprints here, but they believe that she kind of just went down like that. And so you would have a lot of blood at the top, and what happens is that blood at the top would run down, and as blood runs down, it gets broader. So that's why it's thinner at the top, as width, and as it gets down towards the bottom, it's not very big, but if you look closely, you'll see it's thinner at the top and broader at the bottom, and that's because as the blood goes down, it kind of expands out and dries up into or starts absorbing into the wood, and it's basically gravity and blood doing its thing. No, he says, we've just kind of gone our own ways because he's got a lot of stuff going on. Maybe we'll work together in the future, but, he's kind of got his stuff going on, and I've got, my stuff going on. He's moved further out to Florida. I am way on the west side. But, so, yeah, he's a busy guy. So now this is what got everybody kind of worked up in the beginning, and this is where the defense was really kind of making quite the stir in the media because Court TV had released this image up here, which was really nothing like what it actually looked like, and so of course this was playing into the Odin theory, and these sticks were laid on the girls to make some kind of symbol. But and again, my diagram's not even close. It's close, but you got to think it's branches that got roots, sticks, logs that got branches coming out, and there's the whole V thing makes no sense. I don't even see the V, to be honest. And really you have on each girl, the only kind of really main thing is each girl has one kind of big log on them, kind of on their left side. And then with Libby, she just had two other sticks that kind of crossed, And then there was a whole thing that she had horns, in her hair, with two sticks. But they actually looked more like antlers because they were actually going inward, not outward. And it's believed that really, of course, because we know the bodies were moved, and it's likely because she was being moved, there's a bunch of little sticks, and they probably got caught up in her hair. And when they moved her a few feet or whatever, you're going to have leaf sticks in your hair. And anyway, so that is with the sticks. again, my opinion in theory is that they were just covered to kind of cover the bodies. I think maybe he was going to probably place more on them, and I think Brad Weber came home at 3:30, and we know that he would be up on that road at 3:57. So that timing of Brad Weber coming home could have probably spooked him, in my opinion. And that's when he decided, maybe he wasn't going to finish covering him or covering the bodies and decided to get out of there. Of course, that's just my opinion, of course. So let's see here. Let me get caught up in chat here. And we'll see what the updates are. Oh, I know you shared that, Jacqueline. Oh, that is so terrible. Oh, I'm so glad that you were able to get away. I am so sorry that you had to experience that. Ugh. Yeah, Joseph. Yeah, I always kind of had a theory as well. As like maybe because they each had one big kind of log on them. I mean, they weren't these, a tree branch, but, like a tree on them. But, they were they each had one big kind of log on them. And so, yeah, I always kind of wondered if they were weighted down as well, because even, I think in day 2, one of them was asked if there were scavengers in these areas. And they are. I can't remember if they specified what kind of scavengers were out there. So I was kind of also wondered, did they kind of, he was afraid that maybe the bodies would have been like, possibly scavenged, and yeah. So let's see what the updates are, and then if you missed what I talked about the video, because I think that it's very fascinating, and it's a theory I had a long time ago. Again, I'm sure other people may have theorized it as well. Not saying I'm the original person to come up with this idea, but I've always been kind of curious about the video. All right. Let's pull up day 3 here. See if we got more statements. Let's play this here. That's inside the courtroom there. So, obviously we have the jury. I think the defense is here.
Good afternoon, everyone. We begin 13 News at Noon with breaking news in the Delphi murders trial. Today, jurors saw graphic photos of the...
We'll listen to that in a minute. You hold on there. So, I think this is the defense table. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure. And then this is the prosecution. Then we have... I think the witness stand is here. It looks like there's a computer screen. Obviously, they have their, the TV to present their presentations and videos for the juror that's sitting over to the right there. It's kind of curious. They have these seats here. I wonder who's sitting here. Would it be the court reporter? Or is that the witness stand? Maybe that's the witness stand. Actually, that's probably the witness stand so the jury can see them. So maybe the court reporter's over here. Over here. Gosh, it's such a tiny little area. Kind of interesting to see in there. Okay. Let's play this video here. This is just from the news. I think this came out during lunchtime, kind of describing just the atmosphere in there. And then we'll kind of recap. If you came in late, I'll kind of go over the video again, kind of explaining the issues they probably had with it, but it sounds like they did enhance it in some fashion, which will be very, I would love to see and hear it. But I'll explain why the defense has some issues with it and all that. So,
good afternoon, everyone.
I'm going to play this. And then we'll recap some stuff. And then, of course, keep our eye on some updates, excuse me.
We begin 13 News at Noon with breaking news in the Delphi murders trial. Today, jurors saw graphic photos of the crime scene for the first.
That could be, yeah, maybe that. Yep, that would make sense right there. Let me turn this up for you guys.
Time. Our senior investigative reporter Bob Siegel is live in Delphi right now. And Bob, we know you were in the courtroom just now as these images were shown in court.
Yeah. Oh.
I was, Matthew. Really hard day here inside the Carroll County Courthouse.
I'm going to check my AC real quick here.
For justice to be served here, the jury needs to understand what exactly happened at the crime scene. And they today got to see for the first time actual photographs of the crime scene, including bloody footage, pictures of the victims, Abby Williams and Libby German. They saw pictures of their bodies in the woods, and I'll share with you some of the information that you're about to hear is graphic. So just a warning about that. The pictures of Libby's body that the jurors saw, she was lying in the woods naked. The jurors saw both of the girls' throats slit. They saw the blood. What the prosecutor described and warned a few days ago of the gruesome crime scene that these jurors were going to be seeing. And I can tell you that some of the jurors were visibly shaken. One of the jurors put his head down, at one point put his hands on top of his head as he looked down, as some of the most graphic photos were shown. Another juror, she was seen repeatedly just taking big, deep breaths and
so tough.
Adjusting herself in her seat as she was seeing these. These are very tough things for anyone to see, and as you can imagine.
So let me pause that there so I don't get copyrighted strike there. Read some chat. Leah's not convinced. Says crazy little zero evidence gets Richard Allen. I think it's early days, in my opinion, Leah. It's very early days right now. In my opinion, I think the confessions, the bullets, I think, a lot of people mention the bullets. To me, I think the confessions out of anything is probably going to be the most damning evidence, because remember, there's 61 confessions and more, but 61 confessions that have details about the crime scene that only the killer would know. Again, it don't matter if he was beaten half to death. Obviously, he wasn't. The only thing he said that was really causing his mental health to deteriorate, it wasn't these odious guards with patches on them. Remember, he's being filmed at the time when he was in these prisons 24/7. They had cameras. So I'm sure if he was, being assaulted, I'm sure the defense would be snagging those videos. And anyway, according to Allen, is that it was that the lights were on all day and that the other prisoners were shouting at him. Obviously, when you are an alleged child, killer, they don't take well to those kind of people. So you got to keep in mind. But yeah, so there was no, him getting threatened and all that. And in his own words, he said that, his mental health deteriorated because of the lights being on and the noise. And, yeah. But, again, going back to the confessions, if he's revealing details that only the killer would know, how do you explain that?
Imagine extremely difficult for the families to see. And the families of Abby and Libby were in the courtroom today. They put their heads down in their hands and they were crying as they saw these. They got to see the photos for the first time on Saturday. The video that you're seeing, I believe right now, is of the families as they were leaving court at the end of testimony Saturday. The prosecutor gave them a chance to preview the photos that the jury was going to get to see. They were very emotional on Saturday as they left the courtroom, as you can imagine. So the testimony today, it came from Jason Page. He's the Indiana State Police crime scene investigator who processed the crime scene. He methodically walked jurors through 3 crime scene diagrams that he made up based on what he saw at the crime scene, and 43 separate crime scene photos that he took. Before that, we heard testimony from Darren Giancola. He's a Carroll County Sheriff's detective, and he was the first law enforcement officer to see the girls' bodies at the crime scene. He called in the information. He described seeing a substantial amount of blood around both of the girls, and he testified today to the jury. Both had large lacerations to their throats. Again, the jury got to see exactly what the investigators were talking about. Large screens set up in the courtroom where these photographs were shown to the jury. Very challenging, difficult morning of testimony. Because of that, the judge decided to break early around 11:30, just a few minutes ago, and the jury...
Leah says, I thought most of the confessions weren't even true. No, so there's 61 confessions that are, according to the prosecution, and we heard a few of them, like just some tidbits about a box cutter being used. We're not sure if that's one of the fake ones or real ones, but I'm kind of leaning towards that might be one that is actually true, because it appears that they claim 2 different weapons were used, one normal blade and one that was serrated. So if we get time, I'll talk about the box cutter theory thing, because Alan worked at CVS. He was not a pharmacist. He was a shift supervisor. He probably stocked shelves, and probably one of his main tools was a box cutter. And anyway, in one of the confessions, he allegedly said that he killed them with a box cutter, which would make sense with Libby's injuries. Now with Abby, she had, was stabbed. So we'll see. But anyway, long story short, there was multiple confessions. Some that were true and then some that were fake. The theory is that he began confessing to everybody, his mother, his grandmother, and then at some point, the confessions started turning to where they weren't related to, they weren't correct crime scene details. So the theory is that the defense obviously came in and said, maybe start acting kind of, play into this mental health and start confessing about details that are not true. Obviously, that's just theory. So we'll see how that plays out. I think that'll be a little bit more down the road. Yeah, Bear, he confessed to killing his grandchildren, the ones he doesn't even have. Yeah, I mean, that makes no sense. Like, yeah, I think that just kind of shows that he was just trying to spout out stuff at one point. But again, I don't think we want to get too ahead to the confessions. But in my opinion, at the end of the day, if he's confessing to details that only a killer would know, how do you explain that? You know, and they say that there's 61 video, audio of these, so that the jury will hear. So we'll see how that plays out.
Until 1 o'clock, when court will resume, we will be back in the courtroom to bring you more testimony, to tell you more about the evidence that the jurors are weighing through as they see the evidence on a very, very tough day of testimony here in Delphi. Matthew, back to you.
Bob Siegel reporting live for us in Delphi. Thanks, Bob. And of course, Bob and our Emily Longnecker will have complete coverage all week long. We're also breaking down testimony every weeknight at 10 o'clock and then at 9 a.m. after we re-air Sunrise on WTHR Plus. Of course, you can find our Delphi debrief on our streaming app through Apple TV, Amazon Fire Stick, and Roku.
Okay, let me know how the chat speed is, guys, because we'll try to get to some questions as well. Again, I've covered this case a lot. Am I an expert at it? Absolutely not. I feel like I know quite enough to answer some questions, but again, I'm not an expert. Autism GMA says, Chris, have you heard anything so far in court that would change your thought on guilt? I think it's really early days, to be honest. You know, obviously we're not going to hear from the defense side until, you know, we're going to hear prosecution. So, you know, to really make it to answer that, I'd really have to hear from the defense, which obviously is going to be many weeks down the road, just kind of depending on how it goes. But to me, long before we found Richard Allen, you know, we had kind of a broad timeline, right? And when Richard Allen comes in, you know, and says originally that he was there from 1:30 to 3:30, and even claims that he saw 3 females at the Freedom Bridge, and then you have these 3 witnesses that say the same thing around the same time, and then you know, he claims he's on the first platform, and then there's a lady that comes along and says, yeah, I see a man on the first platform. Everything lines up with Bridge Guy's timeline. Like, the suspect itself, whoever it is, likely arrived at 1:30 because the timeline lines right up with, you know, because you're really just on this linear path, you know, when you really kind of break it down into its basic form. You know, and we know we have these timestamps, these metadata, where certain witnesses are at certain times. And then when you throw in his original statement, everything lines up. And so it's like, oh, shit, you know. And he even says he's wearing blue jeans and a blue jacket. I mean, and a hood. And keep in mind, he told this to Dan Doolin, and I think this is before they had released the photograph of the Bridge Guy. But here's an argument to that is, okay, let's say Richard Allen was there at a different time. Just he got there before the killer, and then left around the time the killer arrived. Okay, and then he went to Dan Doolin and, you know, told his story. Well, in 2019, obviously, well, let's go back. Richard Allen, let's say if he was innocent and he was there before the murders happened, clearly he's a local. He lives 5 minutes away from that. That would have been you would think that would be very detrimental, and that would be something that, you know, would affect, you know, a normal person be like, damn, I was there just before these girls got brutally murdered. And then defense claims he parked at the CPS building. He said that in his original statement. So, and then in 2019, their big press conference is like, hey, if anybody knows about anybody parking at the CPS building between a certain time frame, yet he never comes forward. Let's just say if he's innocent, but yet he did park at the CPS building in that time frame that they're asking. You would think that would something that would kind of like haunt him, and he would be kind of motivated to help and come forward again and say, hey, I was there, and this is what I saw, this is what I didn't see, but nothing. Imagine you being there before a brutal murder of these two teenage girls, life snuffed out, and you live just 5 minutes away from this, and you're familiar with, we know Alan's familiar with the bridge. His daughter was, on that bridge, and they took a picture. So we know Alan's familiar with that area. So you would think that a normal person would be haunted and be motivated to want to, help. And where is he? That's just my, and I know other people feel that way. I know it would disturb the hell out of me if I was there and something like that happened. And it's such a small community. And obviously people would be talking about it because it's a small town. So, that's just my argument to that. Yeah, he didn't help search. He didn't come forward. I mean, other than Dan Doolin. And that's the other thing. He didn't go to like a detective. He didn't go in and make it a formal statement where they did it, recorded or, properly did a official interview. No, he met up with a conservation officer who is, he's really just in charge of game. He writes fishing, people who are fishing without a license. He went to somebody that's not like a detective. So it's weird. Like an innocent person would, I would think. Okay, let's see if there's any updates, and then if you came in later, I know I've been kind of repeating this. I will talk about the video because I think this is really huge. Oh, so another thing. Here we go. This doesn't surprise me. So another check that the defense wrote has now bounced. They brought up this yellow rope that they believe that maybe they hung one of the victims upside down and drained their blood and stuff like that. That yellow rope belonged to law enforcement. So, I know some people may not know what I'm talking about, but there was some yellow rope that it was first mentioned by, I think we first heard about in the Frank's Motion, the original one. They kind of spun it to where, it could have been used for them to be hung up, one of the victims. And now we learned that the rope belonged to law enforcement. Very interesting. She's trying to get some records, it looks like. Interesting. We'll see how that plays out. We know Judge Gold is not too keen on transparency, which again I'm not the biggest fan of Judge Gold. That is very interesting about the rope. So they might have used the rope for something, maybe. Whoa, 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 whoa. Stop. Okay, so we still have an update. I'm assuming we'll probably get an update probably here soon in about 15 minutes because 2 p.m. It'll be 4 p.m. I think they'll take their 10-minute break, and I think we'll probably get the second to last update until when they finished. Let me check Twitter, and then I'm going to talk about the video one more time just to kind of explain what's going on there. Okay, let's see what Bob has anything to say. We need Bob. Okay, nothing yet. Alright, so we'll leave that. Let me back up so nothing's playing in the background. Okay. And then we'll get to some questions here. And then I'll just run through a real fast recap as well. Okay, so one of the things there was like a motion earlier today about the bridge guy video. So this video was taken by Libby, of course. Very well known, infamous video. This particular clip itself is just 2 seconds or 1 second. Really, all it is what they were trying to show is his gait. So what they did was they were really trying to show one step from each leg, to obviously represent a gait. And then they kind of tried to cut it and loop it where once one of his right leg comes forward, they re-loop it to where his right leg's going to start again. But when it's slowed down, you can see where the cut is. But when it's playing fast, it looks like he's got a limp. Because there's a pause right there. See that pause? That's where they've cut it and re-looped it. So when you're watching it and it's looped like this, you get the feeling he's got a gimp. And people thought he was peg-legged and stuff like that. But that's not the case. They were just trying to show a footstep from each leg to orchestrate, what his gait was. And then just kind of loop it. But, of course, the way they edited it, I think they did the best they could. But, of course, when they did it, when the loop comes around with the right leg coming forward, it kind of looks like his knees kind of resetting in an awkward way, but it's really just because it's being cut. Sorry, I'm just looking at chat here. I know a lot of chat's going through. I'm going to finish talking about that. We'll get to chat here. So, one of the theories is because, remember, the famous photo of Abby was taken by Snapchat. So, we have our infamous photo here. And that was taken by Snapchat. So it was kind of... where is that bad boy? Oh, there it is. That's a terrible quality. But anyway, that was taken Snapchat. That was at 2:07, right? 2:07? 2:09? 2:07. Which is 6 minutes before Bridge Guy would just apparently haul butt across this bridge to catch up with these girls. So there was always kind of some theory on, was this a Snapchat video? But I think now, especially with the new order, and I'll show you a little clip of that. So I believe what happened is Libby had an iPhone 5S. Now, at that time, the highest quality was 720p. You know, obviously our phones now, 1080p, 4K, you know, much better. Even though 720 was good, you know. Now, back in the day, you know, you could send your videos to the cloud. And to save space, what they would do is they would compress the video. So, you know, say the video was 3 gigabyte or 2 gigabytes. Let's just make it easy. Say if it was 2 gigabytes, they would compress it down to a gig or maybe even a quarter of a gig, obviously to save space. So they compress it. Now, when you would want to go retrieve that, it would uncompress itself. But back then there was a selection on the iPhone that you had to select. And if you didn't, a lot of times when you went to go pull the video back, it would be in its compressed form. And that would obviously be a big issue, because you would get something like this where it's super grainy. It's pixelated. It's because it's not in its original form. It's in its compressed state. But to further support this theory is that the defense brings up something about where they have an issue with this video, because when they hear the audio with like guys, you know, and the girls talking, apparently you can't see the lips moving aren't in sync, or their lips aren't moving at all. And so what happens is when the video gets compressed, one of the many things that can happen is that it will cause the audio to desync from the video itself. So I'm sure many people have seen when audio and video are not synced, you know, and so sometimes the guy's lips are moving and nothing's happening, and all of a sudden words start coming out. But, you know, you can tell, even though his lips are moving, it's almost like when you watch a movie that's been, that's a foreign movie that's been translated to English, their mouths are moving, but clearly the words that are being said are clearly don't line up with the mouth. So this is likely what happened. And I guess it's a shame that they weren't able to uncompress it. But they did mention in the motion today, I think it was today, that they did enhance the video to some degree, and that they also enhanced the audio as well. And then I guess they cut, there was it's a whole 43 seconds. They cut that video into two pieces. I'm assuming to kind of work on it, So in a way, I think that's great that they were able to enhance that, because I think if anybody wants to get to the truth, I doubt, we're going to make out Richard Allen even in the enhanced video, but maybe it'll show a little bit more detail. Maybe we can figure out if this is a driver cap or if this is a beanie. What he's got below. Is that just kind of the brown hoodie kind of hanging out down below? Is that some people thought a kill kit or, a fanny pack? And then obviously the audio of the words down the hill. Guys down the hill, we know, is very, very gritty. It's, you can understand the words to a point, but clearly there's some issues that they weren't able to fix. Okay, I'm gonna just let this video play for a minute. That's recapping everything, and I'm gonna get to questions. I'm assuming we're almost at 2 p.m. I'm assuming they're gonna be taking a break here in about 8 minutes. I'm just assuming. Obviously, it all depends on the witness that's on the stand right now and when they find appropriate time to take a break. So I'm expecting we should get at least one more update before the final update at the end of the day where the court ends. So let's throw this out.
Teenage girls, Abby Williams and Liberty German, had made last-minute plans to go to the
one more thing I want to
Hybrid.
mention before I get to chat. I did forget one thing that I thought was very interesting. And that has to do... Well, actually, let me go back up. Okay, that's 137. Right here. Perfect. One of the things we heard from Steve Mullen on day 1 is that he actually went to the Hoosier Harv store, and he went to check the security camera because, and I'll show you here in just a second. Oh, did we pass it? Oh, we did pass it. Here's the Hoover Harv store. Okay. I just want to mention this real quick, and then we'll get to chat.
There is a
here.
working camera on this building here. According to the PCA, it shows a black Ford Focus passing by at 1:27 p.m. Allegedly, this would be Richard Allen.
So, apparently Steve Mullen went there, I believe on February 14th, or sometime around in that time frame. And he said, now, of course, they got the footage, the actual footage. But he said at the time, he had them play the video from a certain time frame, maybe like, I don't know, 2 to 6, 2 to 4, whatever. But he said he was taking pictures on his phone of vehicles. So that tells me that... at the very least, you could probably make out the car. I'm assuming it's not going to be 4K because obviously it's 2017, and I'm sure there's some distance between the camera and the car. But if he's able to at least take a picture of a security video of cars, that I think that's a great sign for me, for the prosecution, and for those that want the truth. I think that's a huge deal. So I just wanted to mention that. I thought that was very interesting. That was also mentioned. So I'm just going to let this play here for a minute so we can do some chat, answer some questions. Let me make sure I didn't miss anybody. I'm sure I did. If I did, it's sometimes, because especially when we get almost 1,000 people in here, chat's going fast. If you donated or sent a membership, it can be very easily overlooked. Tabitha Greaves comes in with a $3 super sticker. God bless you, Tabitha. I appreciate the support. It means the world to me. Let's see here. We've got Metallica. Is that Metallica? Oh my gosh, I love that band. One of my favorite bands of all time, Metallica. Oh my gosh. He says one thing I think that helps RA is kind of crazy that he would tell someone he was on the bridge at 1:30 to 3:30. If he did do it, now I do think he's guilty. One thing that I think helps RA is... Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. Yeah, yeah, I'm just reading. I'm sorry, it's kind of small. Whenever I'm at the bottom, it's smaller than the ones that are up top. It's so weird. So I'm just kind of reading this so I get the full context. Now I do think he's guilty. Okay, so you do think he's guilty. Yeah, it is crazy. Well, I mean, it sounds like he was just telling the truth, really, the first time around that he was there. Now, obviously, he wasn't there till 3. The killer wasn't there. Was there much longer. He left at well, I mean, 3:30 is close. He left at 3:57, probably around 4 p.m. But thank you so much, Metallica, and you know we still got a long ways to go. I think a lot of people are, you know, I'm sure there's still a lot of people on the fence. I think the confessions. I think it's going to be the big deal. I think that's where, you know, the public and maybe the jurors, that's where, you know, once they hear all of the confessions on both sides, I think there's going to be some firm ground, you know, depending on how those go. Again, the bullet, you know, could still be big, but I know that looking at some old videos of some experts in that kind of field say that, yeah, with the extractor bullet theory, that it really kind of it varies case to case. Where I think whereas a fired bullet is more, you know, there's more things that they can obviously tell from the bullet, whereas the ejector only has these little scratch marks, and so yeah, we'll have to see how the bullet goes. Yeah, not to get off track, but yeah, Metallica is amazing. I'm not buying the machine wash and the hair theory, not with the root attached to it. The only way a root is attached is if it gets pulled. Yeah, but I mean, either way, at the end of the day, if it's Libby's family, however it ended up there, you know, it's not going to be a help to the defense. In my opinion, I don't see where that's going to help the defense, because we've never had a female. There's no female suspects on either side, prosecution or defense. So, to me, whether they figure it out or not, I think it's kind of a nothing burger. Gail, good to see you. A huge supporter of this channel. God bless you. I hope you're doing well. Is it the beanie he has at the part? That's why I played that. I really think he has a beanie on. You know, I always kind of thought the driver cap, you know. But now I'm kind of leaning more towards the beanie as being something that was on it. Stephanie says, do you think it's strange that they didn't scream or try to run, neither of them? You know, that's stuff that we really don't know. I think they may have tried to run. That might have been the interruption, and they ran across the creek. And then that pissed off the killer. The scream, again, if you have a gun pulled on you, it's tough to say what you would do in that situation. I know I'd probably freeze up. I hate guns. I've been shot at one time, not like I wasn't the target. I just happened to be in a very, very terrible spot with two kids, in a bad drug deal gone wrong, and it just happened in the neighborhood, and bullets were flying literally over my head and over the kids that I was babysitting, and that was literally one of the most terrifying experiences ever. Anyway, I don't want to get off track on that, but yeah, I know I would probably freeze if a gun was pulled on me. Anyway. Lacey says, I heard that originally they didn't release the full audio because in the audio you could hear the guy mentioning a gun. Yep. Well, actually, it was not him mentioning the gun. It was the girl, Abby. She says, is that a gun? Oh my gosh, he's got a gun. And also apparently in that clip, you can actually hear him cock it. So this is where the whole bullet, because there's a lot of people that still don't understand how that unspent bullet got there. And it was likely because he cocked that gun, obviously, which would, if there wasn't a live round in there in the chamber when he cocked it, then now that puts a live round in the chamber. And maybe sometime when they cross the creek, maybe again, according to his confessions, we're going to learn, and this was in the prosecution's opening statements, that we're going to learn how and why, and break the other one, but how and why he did it, and that he got interrupted. And again, details that only the killer would know. Obviously, we've heard that this was a sexually motivated attack, which I don't think would surprise many people with the motive. But somehow something was interrupted. Courtney says, I find it hard to believe Libby was videotaping him in his face while he said down the hill. No, according to many reports, that Libby, had the phone down to her side. There's even one that, this is a rumor, so keep in mind, rumor, that she actually had the phone upside down. So this whole bridge guy video, or at least this clip that we're seeing, is allegedly, again, we don't know. We'll find out eventually. But it has been rumored that was actually, she had the phone actually kind of upside down, probably down by her hip. Again, but either way, I think the phone was down by her side, filming for a little bit, and then maybe put it in her pocket, and the recording stopped. Yeah, that's probably likely what happened. The girl's clothing again, yeah, because Abby was wearing Libby's sweatshirt. The sweatshirt was recently washed, and hair and fibers. You got all this different clothing, and it's all Libby's clothing. I'm assuming maybe some clothing from the other family as well. So that's why they were testing, the grandmother, and yeah. Yeah, that I agree, Bear. I don't know why they never tested that hair. That seems really ridiculous. Um, Maybe when they found out it was a female hair, they weren't as interested because obviously they felt like, uh, there was male suspects at the time. Yeah, it's been kind of weird. Richard Allen's been reported as kind of, some have said he's 5'4". There's other report. It depends on which jail or whatever correctional facilities in. We've seen 5'5" and 5'4", so maybe he's like 5'4" and a half. So, oh, thank you so much, Pam Jam. This is a very, sensitive topic with two teenage girls. I think about when I went, when I was a kid, we had a park that was in our neighborhood. Obviously it wasn't this big, but it was heavily wooded, had trails, and we skateboarded. But we went there a lot at that same age. And I remember when I first heard about this, and man, I would think like, because a lot of times we were there, we'd see, one or two people here and there, but, it was pretty private park. And, obviously only known to the locals around there. I'm sure a lot of people had no idea of this little park. But yeah, I would think to myself, like, being with my best friend and we're doing our thing and then somebody comes up with a gun. And again, I'm not a huge fan of guns. And yeah, I don't know, it just breaks my heart that these girls had to experience that. And then not only that, but one of them, at some point, they probably knew they were going to die. And the fact that one of them had to watch the other one first die, knowing that you were going to die next. How horrible. How horrible. For those two girls to have to experience that. And the one, Abby, to watch her friend die first. And then... No. Oh my gosh. And that's why, to me, once Richard Allen came around, everything lined up. Everything lined up with what he said in his original statement with Dan Doolin. And no matter what the defense has said, it's a lot of the things the defenses came around and said. They write these checks and they bounce. They take things out of context or twist them, and yeah. No, Ron Logan was there. He was at a garbage dump for a few hours before the murders, and then possibly home during the murders. But this is the thing is, Ron Logan got a phone call at 2:09 p.m. The bridge guy video starts at 2:13. So if Ron Logan was the killer, he would have had to have been on the bridge and on the phone. And if that phone call lasts more than 5 minutes, 4 minutes, because it's at 2:09, then there's no way it could be Ron Logan, because he would be on his phone. You would see a guy talking on his phone. So I think there's some issues with that. What am I missing here? Okay, it's after 2 p.m. Let's see if there's some updates, guys. Depending on what goes on, we'll run for about maybe an hour. Oh, we got more. I think we got more here. Okay, we've got more. Okay, so let me take a sip here. We've got some more updates. Another witness. So this is our 11th witness. I agree, Bear. Yeah, you would think, like, oh my gosh, they found a hair in her hand. That would be, yeah, that it really does. It's like, what, why didn't they do that? Maybe I guess they did. Clearly, they did some testing because they found out it was female. So maybe once they found out it was female, they kind of put it off. But yeah. Okay, so we have Dwayne or Diane. No, that's Dwayne. Boy, gosh, they're giving me some really great names here. Dwayne Datsman. Okay, he is a police crime scene investigator. I'm just going to go Dwayne here. Dwayne currently works with the Benton County Sheriff's Office. Dwayne retired from the Indiana State Police 3 years ago. He started in 1987. He's got 20 years as a crime scene investigator. Dwayne said he investigated hundreds of crime scenes, including 200 death investigations. Dwayne was a crime scene investigator for the Delphi murders. Dwayne said he was at the Lafayette Post when he noticed he was needed at the crime scene. Dwayne said he got to the scene at 1:11 p.m., so not long after they had found the bodies. Dwayne said he took photos at the crime scene and was told to look for evidence along the water. Dwayne said he took photos from a helicopter above the crime scene. Oh, interesting. Very interesting. So, because we know there was 2 helicopters, flying around. So maybe he got in one of those. Dwayne said he left the scene at 10:30 that night. Prosecutor Attorney Jim Luttrell then asked Dwayne to explain what jurors were seen in the crime scene photos he took. Then we also hear... So Jason Page, the witness, was the 10th witness. Looks like we got some questions from the defense. So they probably finished with the prosecution asking him questions and then went to lunch. And then the defense then cross-examined this Jason Page. They asked if there were scavengers in the woods such as coyotes, buzzards, as well as insects that could be used to determine the time of death. Page said crime scene investigators are not allowed to have an opinion on time of death at the crime scene. Oh, so maybe that's the coroner, the medical examiner's responsibility. Rosie asked Page if he was aware there were breaches of the crime scene reportedly early during the investigation. Interesting. Which included photos taken by someone else, to which Page said no. Alright, So, seems the defense is trying to see if there was any issues with how things were going and with the photos taken, but Page said no. Rosie then asked Page if he was aware of any DNA evidence taken from the crime scene that linked to Richard Allen, to which Page said no. Page wasn't able to recall if there had been any evidence of bodily fluids recovered from the scene. Rosie asked if it was safe to assume sticks found on the girl's body was a human act, not nature, which Page said that would be reasonable. So yeah, that's a good question, I guess. I mean, seems kind of obvious with how they were laid out that there wasn't just branches falling on them. Rosie asked Page how long it would take to process evidence like the hair found on Abby's hand, which Page said Rosie is asking questions outside of his expertise. That makes sense. He's only a crime scene expert. He's not somebody that works in the lab doing the DNA testing. Page then said DNA evidence could take a few weeks, but sometimes can be rushed. Let me take a sip here. Then Rosie asked Page about the unfired bullet cartridge found at the scene next to Libby's foot. Rosie asked if Page had seen any footage of the cartridge being removed, to which Page responded no. So this has definitely been something that the defense has kind of harped on, that, you know, the way this unspent bullet was found, how it was photographed, how the chain of custody happened, obviously, because, you know, that they can kind of use that, build a kind of a defense around that this was mishandled and possibly placed there to frame Richard Allen, which, again, for the defense, I would understand that. That makes sense. That's something I would probably agree with as far as defense strategy. Rosie asked if it would be significant if the cartridge was damaged, which Page responded, could be. The cartridge, if anybody's wondering, the cartridge is the unspent bullet. So just keep in mind, if you're wondering why they keep mentioning cartridge, that is the unspent bullet. Rosie asked Page if he was asked to investigate the area by the farmhouse near Mears Trailhead along 300 North, which Page responded no. Farmhouse near Mears. Interesting. In the redirect, so now it's prosecution, Jim Luttrell asked Page if he noticed any bug activity on February 14th, which he responded no. We know, not to get graphic, but we know bodies that are left out with a certain amount of time, bugs, obviously, just nature does its course. And usually I think it takes a while because, you know, the body and the gases are doing their things, and then eventually, yeah. Luttrell asked Page who was there at Ground Zero area. Page saying 3 crime scene investigators, Sergeant Jim Cody and the coroner. Okay, I'm just seeing how this is worded. It's kind of worded weird here. ISP Sergeant Jim Cody and the coroner to move the girls' bodies. Page said Libby's body was moved first, and the cartridge had already been discovered by then. Luttrell asked Page if putting the cartridge on a table to take a photo serve an evidentiary purpose, which Page responded no. On the table to take the photo. I mean, I understand. Yeah, you would take the bullet, put it on a table to get a better picture of it. Then there was a redirect by the defense. Rosie asked Page if a box of .40 caliber rounds would all look alike, which Page said yes. Rosie asked Page if the bullet is totally different. If the bullet is totally different part of the cartridge. Where you can't see the bullet in the cartridge case, which Page said yes. Oh, the bullet. Okay, yeah. Because the bullet in the cartridge. Yeah, okay. Again, I'm not a real big gun person, but yeah. Let me check Reddit here. Oh, there it is. Oh, this is oh, okay. This is from, so obviously, since we don't have transcripts, we got reporters, and obviously there's tons of people talking, or not tons of people talking, but obviously you've got questions and answers being asked, and we know that sometimes people in the courtroom, because it's got some bad acoustics in it, that some people that are taking notes can't always hear what's being said. So you may get one group or one person that's taking notes get certain things but miss other, and then you have another journalist who is this kind of same situation, may miss certain things but also record things that maybe others missed. So kind of get this gulag of different testimonies. So, and there's usually details that we didn't hear from one person from the other. So let's we'll recap this one, see if there's anything new, if you guys are okay with that, because I already noticed just by proofreading there's some questions I didn't see asked or reported on the other reporter, W2HR. So we have WTHR, and then we have Wish TV. Okay. Let's go over this and see if we hear anything new. Obviously, we're going to go back to the beginning. Obviously, we're talking about crime scene. We'll try to do this very respectful. John Cola was served as a deputy. Okay, we know his background. I'm just going to proofread this. Okay, John Cola began looking for the girls at midnight. Couldn't see much in the woods using his flashlight. He noted to the jury that he saw a disturbance near the end of the high bridge where bare ground could be seen. Interesting. So it sounds like he's saying that there's disturbance. Let me know if you guys are, for those that are very familiar with this case, sounds like he's saying that he is over here and saying there's some like ground disturbance or something. Somewhere in this area here. I could be wrong. I'll of course, once I finish, I'm gonna check everybody's notes and try to put everything together. But yeah, he said he noted to the jury saw disturbance near the end of the high bridge where bare ground could be seen. So that is, that would be this area here. He pointed out that a nearby firefighter, he said he pointed it out to a nearby firefighter, but eventually ended his search at 2 a.m. Okay, McClellan asked Giancola, at the point you ended the search at 2 a.m., were you investigating a murder? And he replied, no, we didn't think anything bad had happened to the girls at that point. He was later sent to an address to ask questions about the girl, received a call from a person named Liggett to go to the Morning Light Cemetery. We were told somebody had found something, possible bodies, near the creek. After arriving at the creek, he was shown Libby German's tie-dye shirt and shoes found in the creek. Someone then informed him the girls' bodies were behind him. He said he could not see the bodies when walking to the creek. So that just shows you. So he was, when he came back, he arrived at the cemetery, and he went walking down to the creek. Remember, the clothes were kind of found maybe a little bit west of the bodies, I guess. And as he was walking down, he said he didn't even see the bodies, and he probably walked right past them. John Cullen said he recognized that based on the pictures described the girls' bodies, he did not perform life-saving measures. Apparently, they were deceased. He then called officers close to the area to make sure no one came around. John Cullen stayed at the Deer Creek scene the remainder of February 14th, and he did not leave until sunrise February 15th. Defense Edward Baldwin began cross-examination, asked Giancola his search timeline, the area where the girls were found, and to better explain what their bodies looked like. He was also asked what gun he was carrying at the scene. He said a Glock 17 9mm. Obviously, the defense is going to ask each officer what gun they were carrying because, if they were carrying a 40 cal weapon, they could say, oh, well, did you drop your bullet or plant a bullet? Okay. Jason Page. Yes, there was. That's been rumored. We still have to say that's rumored, but yeah, that's been mentioned a lot. Okay, so Jason Page, state second witness. Of course, we already went over his background. Page described the area behind the tape about the size of a softball field, but focused on the area where Abby and Libby were found. They called Ground Zero. Of the 45 state exhibits during Page's testimony, 42 crime scene photos were shown, which included several images of Abby and Libby's bodies, as well as other evidence from the scene. Family members of the girls and Richard Allen were emotional. Oh, that's new. So, even Richard Allen's family, they were emotional. Much of the courtroom struggled watching and recording, because obviously they're showing very sensitive, terrible things done to these poor girls. Okay. Not gonna read the rest of that. Okay, so this is where I see a few things that are different. Okay, so the defense started questioning Jason Page. Page said it was not his job to determine the time of death when asked his opinion on when that may have happened. Do you know if a ape test kit was given. I would assume I wasn't there. Rosie next asked about the sticks placed over the bodies. Page said he's seen other death investigation where bodies had sticks placed over them. Very interesting. Page said in Delphi, a human appeared to have placed sticks over the girls' bodies. So remember they asked, I think the defense asked him, was it natural or was this a human element? But that's interesting. Page saying, hey, I've worked on another investigation where bodies had sticks placed on them. That's very interesting. Page later explained his job. He was the 14th law enforcement officer to arrive at the crime scene, was to preserve the area through photography. Prosecutors next called Dwayne Datsman, which I probably butchered, a crime scene tech, to the stand. He's now retired. He was 20 years as a CSI, visit hundreds of crime scenes. Dwayne talked about more than a dozen photos of the crime scene. He talked about where blood was found on and near the girls' bodies. He also noted, whoa, this is interesting. He also noted glitter was found on leaves on the ground. Interesting. Wonder if one of the girls had glitter on them or something. Never heard that one before. He also talked about photos of the gun cartridge found near one of the girls' bodies. He said he did not disturb the cartridge. Obviously, the cartridge is the bullet, more or less, the unspent bullet. Dwayne also said the sticks on the bodies were of no evidentiary value. They did not have blood on them. The sticks were later placed in evidence storage at a police station. So they did take the sticks to evidence. So there's kind of a little bit more about the kind of defense on oh yeah, so here in this one he says, I kept seeing glitter in the leaves. Underneath the leaves we found the .40 caliber. That's interesting.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Dwayne said that they also used metal detectors on February 15th, so a day after they found the bodies, on a larger area to see if they could locate any other evidence. One photo Dwayne took showed a disturbance in the soil on the steep hill from the bridge down the hill. Oh, this is interesting. One photo taken by Dwayne showed a disturbance in the soil on the steep hill from the bridge down the hill, but there was no shoe impressions left there. Okay. Very interesting. Yeah, a bullet. It's the unspent bullet that they found. We'll go back to the huge news here in just a second. But yeah, they found a... They found an unspent bullet. So obviously the bullet was a live round. So remember when the suspect was on the bridge and he cocked the gun? So now there's a live round in the chamber. One of the theories is when they crossed the creek, it's perhaps maybe he went to intimidate him again by cocking the gun. So when you have a live round and you're cocking the gun again, what happens is it ejects the live round out. And he may not have realize that there was a live round in it. There's also theories there might have been a struggle and, somebody cocked the gun and then extracted out, but somehow it got extracted out. But this disturbance in the soil, this goes back to... I want to screenshot that real quick. I think this is very interesting because this kind of goes back to the theory that the girls might have tried to make a run for it. I find this very fascinating. And this goes along with Jake Johns. Is it Jake John? Yeah, Jake Johns' testimony. Let me show you guys what I'm talking about. Very fascinating. Gail, Chris, did they find some footprints that's how they found the girls? No, these footprints were found. Well, they could have been from the girls, but they were found on this access road here. And this Jake Johns, he was on the access road sometime before, after they'd found the tie-dye shirt. And, we know that there's these two hills, for those who are familiar. There's that bridge that goes along. When you say down the hill, there's one steep hill, then there's the access road, and then after the access road, there's another steep hill. They say that they found some footprints here. According to Jake Johns, he had seen what appeared to be a large rock that had been dislodged, also what appeared to be somebody that slid down it. Kind of in this area here. And so here's the first hill. And then we see the access road. And as we could see, obviously because the foliage and everything, it's kind of not the best, but you get an idea that there's a steep embankment. And now, according to this officer, he was obviously checking out this crime scene, or not the crime scene itself, but around the crime scene, just this area in general. And he said he took some photographs. And what was the wording again? Disturbance in the soil on the steep hill from the bridge. Now, he says there was no shoe impressions left there, but maybe that was from the steep hill itself. But I think that's kind of interesting because, again, that could be where maybe Bridge Guy was ordering down the hill and maybe it was him that fell, and then the girls attempted to run across the creek. That's kind of interesting. Yeah, Gelhar. Yeah, she was on the swim team. Makes sense she would head for water. I would think so. I would think at the very least they would have taken photographs if there was. But yeah, you would hope that they would document as much as possible. So Alan says they typically carry 9mm 45. Yeah. Glowbug. Richard Allen really, I think there was like a speeding ticket. He didn't really have, that's why I think he was such a hard person to find. Cause he didn't have that background, like a disturbing background, like maybe like a serial killer would, where they were like, doing terrible things when they were younger. Not to say that's always the case, you know. See what we got. If there's anything else. Oh, why is everything deleted? That's weird. And look at Twitter here. I think we'll go just a little bit longer, guys, and we'll finish up. I appreciate everybody being in here. Seems like a lot. Most of the people been in here have been very respectful. I guess we'll just go ahead while we're here. I don't think it'll hurt to just ask. You know, we don't need to really dive into it, but. I'm just going to put it up there, see what where we're at. Do you think Richard Allen is guilty? We'll just see. Just kind of gauge where everybody's at. Again, for those that know me, I think the evidence is there. You know, we looked at this case. A lot of people looked at this case long before Richard Allen came along. And, you know, there was these persons of interest that, you know, not really in the on law enforcement side, but really just in the social media realm, and nothing ever lined up or led anywhere. And then when Richard Allen came along and we had that 1:30 to 3:30 timeline, and when you put together a visual timeline, you know, you get to kind of see where everything lines up, and that timeline just adds right up. And then the fact that he mentioned that he saw 3 girls, it just, everything kind of lined up. And then again, we've only had just a small kind of a few clips of what these confessions are, and you know, I'm sure it's still going to be a bit before we get to the confessions. I'm assuming the confessions are going to be more towards probably the end of the prosecution's case. So we'll have to see. I don't know. That's a good question. Hey, Tommy. Good to see you. Welcome. Yeah, I know an adult who actually frozen, compiled when faced life and death situation. Yeah. That's why, just because of the brutal murder of these girls, you know, of course, you know, I've worked on YouTube for over 2.5 years, and I know, you know, it's almost kind of like I've gotten some experience as being kind of like a amateur journalist, reporter, whatever, and working with YouTube, you know what the algorithm, you know what kind of videos are going to do well. You know, the more kind of conspiracy, the more the Richard Allen ones where there's, you know, these kind of wild theories, you know, they tend to do well. But to me, knowing what happened to these girls, and that all the persons of interest, Kagan Klein, Tony Klein, Ron Logan, I mean, that's the main ones. that none of them were a good fit except for Richard Allen. And knowing that it's more than likely that he's the one that was responsible for doing this, I just cannot imagine defending this guy. Again, we'll still cover everything and look at both angles, but it just kind of makes me sick to my stomach. I mean, this guy's a monster, and again, keep in mind, long before Richard Allen came along, these girls were murdered, and the family have been waiting for justice for nearly 7.5 years. And I think, if Richard Allen is found not guilty, these girls will probably never get justice. So it's either now or never. And to me, the whole him being a patsy makes no sense, because they would have thrown him under the bus on day one, if that was the case. Yeah, Stephanie says he came forward in the beginning, then hid lower than a roach. Yep. Yeah, if he was innocent, you would think he would have. That would have been very traumatizing to him to know that he was there, just before these girls were killed. And, why didn't he come forward and, to detectives? And when they asked about the person that was parked at CPS, because according to his attorneys, he was there parked at the CPS. And according to him in his original statement, he said he parked at the CPS building. So he was parked where the killer parked. So why didn't this guy come forward and say, hey, this is the time frame I was there from, and here's what I remember seeing. But we didn't get, he didn't do that. Yeah, I think if there was another person involved, we would have heard something by now. Because it's kind of cut a deal. Yep. Place himself there wearing the exact same thing. And keep in mind, he did that not just before they had actually released because I don't think the killer ever knew that he was recorded. So I don't think he was worried about telling them. He was clearly being 100% honest. And yeah. It was Abby that had either a strand or a few strands of hair in her hand. Keep in mind, she was wearing Libby's sweatshirt. And what likely had happened is before she wore that, it was washed the night before. So obviously it was washed with a bunch of Libby's clothes. And then, that means hairs and fibers are going to transfer around to clothing. And it's likely she probably was like grabbing her sweatshirt, at some point, and maybe got, some hair on her. But all I'm going to say is, I said this earlier, so for those that are not familiar, I worked at Albertsons for 7 years. I was a dairy manager. I was on the fast track to actually become like a store manager. And it was at the time, it was a pretty profitable food chain, grocery chain at the time. But then they ended up going bankrupt, and And then I dropped out, not because I was behind. I just dropped out because I started working because my family wasn't really, they weren't poor, but, I didn't really get the things I would, the other kids would get for Christmas. Anyway, so when I turned 16, I started working, and then I got money, and so I kind of got distracted with work, and even though I was on track to graduate, my senior year I kind of dropped out just to continue working. Anyway, so that always bothered me. I didn't get my diploma, so then I went back and got my diploma after working 7 years for Albertsons. And then after that, I would eventually work for the post office. Now, to work for the post office, you have to do, it just kind of depends on what you're doing, but I had to take kind of like, it was like an IQ test. You had to do like math problems. You had to do, story problems with math in them, straight up math. And then the biggest one was memory test. And then you had to score a 70 or higher. And then depending on your score is where you get your placement of higher. Anyway, long story short, then I became a postman. I didn't deliver. I worked at the hubs. And so now I'm government, and of course then I had to swear to protect my country. That's something when you're a government worker, you have to do the official oath, to protect your country from foreign and domestic. And anyway, right after I became a post office worker, that's when I started getting jury duty things like crazy. And so I ended up doing jury duty. And I won't talk much about the jury duty itself too much, but I got picked. And it's so surreal because when you get there and you sit down and you're in this environment, and once you're picked, it's like, oh shit. Like, even though we kind of, they did the pre-jury selection thing, right? So we kind of got a little bit of what was going on with the case. And really, just long story short, it was domestic dispute between a husband and a mother and a kid. The father, they split. The father got custody because the mother was kind of cuckoo. And she was the... she was the defendant. And anyway, long story short, she did some very terrible things. Not murder or anything like that, but just some DV kind of stuff. And but yeah, when you're on a jury, you are like, oh shit, like I have to, even though I'll be honest, I formed an opinion right away that I could tell she was trying, because she was an attractive person, so I could tell, and I don't know, that may be why they tried to pick me, because it was defense that, I think there was defense that kind of picked me, and I don't know if they were trying to pick me, and they were trying to, like, for her looks, I don't know, I don't want to get too much into it, but anyway, being a juror, it was like, damn, I have to take this seriously. I can't, the opinions I formed when we did jury selection, I have to throw that all out the window because you listen to the jury instructions, right? You don't start forming opinions until you start hearing the witnesses' testimonies. And anyway, it only lasted 2 days, wasn't a big thing. And, of course, found her guilty. It was pretty straightforward, but still, it's like, like, you take this serious. And anyway, what I'm trying to say is I think these jurors are going to be responsible, and they'll look at the facts of the case. Sorry to ramble on, but that's just something that experience of being on the jury. Jojo, why did it take him 4 years to find Anthony's shots count off Libby's phone when it was there all along? That is actually not true. They knew about Kagan Klein right away. I forget all those details because I've kind of flushed those out. I don't know if that was 4 years for the Anthony shots. Now, yeah, it took them 4 years to announce the Anthony shots, but I think they knew about that, at least part of it, long before that. I don't know why they waited to release that. That is a good question. But I don't think it ever led anywhere, other than that he just happened to talk to Libby, which is just crazy. Jacqueline says, how's the defense going to prove he left at 2:15 when law enforcement can't trace his phone due to 5 years gone by? I don't know what they're doing with the 2:15. Well, actually, I have a theory on the 2:15 because I did a video. It's actually coming up here. That when he changed his timeline to noon to 1:30, and I know I've shown this multiple times, but here's the issue. We have these juveniles where we have these, remember, they're on a linear path, and they take pictures at the bridge at 12:43. And if we rewind that, we know it's about 20 to 25 minutes. They were probably at the bridge for 17 minutes. And they went there to the Freedom Bridge at 1:26 because they took a picture of the bench there. So that's huge. So we know these girls got around there about sometime around noon. Well, he parks at CPS building at noon. And if you play this scenario out between noon and 1, well, you would either have the girls just behind Richard Allen or the other way around where Richard Allen's just behind the girls. And no matter what, they would have ran into each other at the bridge because the girls spent, about 17 minutes there. But there's no mention of bridge, of a guy on a bridge when they were there. They would have had to have run into each other. It's almost like these girls were like security guards for this linear path. And then the other major issue is if Richard Allen is leaving at 1:30, well, guess who's showing up at 1:30, parking at the CPS building? That's the killer. So how did Allen not run into the killer and oh yeah, here's what he was driving, here's what he looked like. That makes no sense. So I think that's why they had to throw the 2:15 in there, because I don't think Allen, when he got basically arrested, and they questioned him, and then he tried to say noon to 1:30. I don't think he was realizing that the killer arrives at 1:30, and yeah, it sounds stupid. Yeah, Janet says, I've been on a criminal jury too. It's very humbling. Yeah, it's such a wild experience because you've got a responsibility to listen to the judge's instructions, what you're, I mean, it was crazy. It was surreal. It kind of sucked because I was working night shifts at the time. I was working graveyard shifts. So, man, I was pretty beat that first night that we did it. The second day I remember more, but I mean, I was awake, but it was still kind of a blur because I was working graveyards. But yeah, it is. It's such an experience that it's, you know, something I'll never forget for sure. Yeah, yeah. If we can, yeah. Don't talk about the family. I think that's, I think that's really low for people to mention that. Yeah, again, that's why I like to do visual timelines, because it really puts everything into perspective of where things should line up, and that's why I think visual timelines are the best, because once you know point A to point B, the time frame of how long that's going to take, and this whole thing is, until they're taken down the hill, everything's on a linear path. I know I keep saying that, but it's not like they were picked up and driven over somewhere else and something happened there and then they were taken, over there. This is just one linear path, and we have physical evidence, hard evidence of photos taking place at certain times, and we can use that to gauge when and where these girls were at certain times. And again, so you just kind of put logic to it. When the game says, how does it work in the jury? What happens if 95% say guilty and one says, now, of course, I didn't experience that. Man, I bet that would be tough. Usually when that happens, that it depends on where you're at. If you just originally do your first, vote as a group, and you come to 9, usually you have 12 jurors. So if it's, 10-2, then those two people that are, on the outside, then you have discussions. Okay, why are you voting this way? And then of course they work it out, and then maybe they all re-examine the evidence. They both kind of look at each other's perspectives, then spend more time looking at evidence, and then they do another vote, and they continue that process, and then and usually they'll come to their senses, one way or the other. So we got 263 votes. We got a lot of people in here, but if you'd like to vote, if not, I understand. I mean, it is anonymous. Right now, 56% say they believe he's guilty. About 30% not sure, still on the fence. I definitely respect that. I think a lot of people want to see the evidence before they make a decision. So happened when I served. If jury remains hung for 2 days, it's hung jury. Yeah. If you guys can't agree after, it kind of depends on the judge and how long they want to keep it going, because they spend a lot of, it all depends on the trial itself, but they want a resolution to it, because a hung jury means that means they're going to have to try it again and spend more money. All right, let's see if there's anything else, and then I think we're going to finish up here. Nothing on that one. Nothing on that. Okay. Oh gosh. Sorry, I'm just proofreading this real quick. So this is the motion about the video. This is where we learned that they enhanced the video for those I was talking about earlier, and how I believe, this was a video that was taken, but was maybe sent to the cloud. It was compressed for some reason. When they retrieved it, it didn't uncompress, and so that's why we got a terrible video and audio quality. It appears that they did enhance the files. It seems like they split the 43-second video in 2 videos and enhanced them. And they've kind of put things that are said by the girls and the suspect, and then, of course, put them on a loop, because obviously not a lot of words are probably said, so that makes sense. It's misleading. So the defense says allowing witnesses to speculate as to what the words and sounds are on the recording would put ideas in the juror's head. Allowing a witness to speculate as to the words and sounds on the recording would put ideas in the juror's head that would be confusing and misleading. Yeah, so I think the defense is also saying if they play this and they have like a witness on the stand, probably the one that enhanced the videos, and says, okay, so he's saying guys down the hill, but if he says down the hill and then you play the clip down the hill, you're I forget what that's called, but obviously you're gonna hear down the hill because I've just said that. It's like me telling you, don't think about elephants. What are you thinking about? Elephants. So, yeah, so they're kind of arguing that, which I could kind of agree to. I could see both sides of that. Thank you so much, Cunningham. I appreciate it. I want to say a huge shout out to my wonderful mods sticking it out. We started at noon, so we went 3 hours. God, it feels like we went a little bit longer than that, but let me check Twitter here, and then we'll finish up. Whoa, Casey Anthony's trending. I wonder what the hell she's doing. Of course, if you look up Twitter and Richard Allen, you're going to get 99% pro Richard Allen. See what Bob Siegel. What's the Siegel saying? Oh, he still got his bagel there. So they must be still going on. I'm assuming we probably won't hear anything until after they get out, which is, it could be anywhere from now until an hour or less than an hour. So they're probably about done finishing up. So it'll probably be one more big dump of information or interview. But that's a lot to go through. Obviously, I am going to go through after everything's done today, and I'll kind of double check, because there's definitely been some some info that was obviously incorrect. They said girls down the hill, which is not correct. They also claim that it took 9 minutes to walk from the Freedom Bridge to the High Bridge, but obviously that takes more like 20 to 25 minutes. So there has been some, some reporting that has been, I'm sure not purposely misleading, but incorrect. Jojo says, I'm so on the fence. I respect that. I think, there's, this case is very unique. I think the confessions, to me, I think are going to be the big thing, in my opinion. So we'll end the poll here. So about 55 say yes, they're set on guilty. 17 say no. And we got a good portion still on the fence. So we'll end that there. Leah says, can Richard Allen go home if it's a hung jury? I don't know. I think they'll come out at the end of the day, Sensei. I'm sure we'll get them. But yeah, I think it usually seems like they come at the end, hours after trial's over and they get released. So, let me just make sure I didn't miss anybody. And I did. Haley Shoop, thank you so much for the $2 super sticker. God bless you. And thank you to everybody, Lone, Jennifer, CR, Wallflower, Mitzi, Tabitha, John, Amy, Metallica, great name. Thank you guys so much for the support. And anybody that donated through PayPal, sometimes I don't always get them, but I think Carol sent me something. So bless you guys. I'll be back tomorrow. Of course, I'll be going through everything. I do have my Patreon. I'm going to start uploading. If I get time today, I'm not sure, but I'm going to eventually start uploading stuff to my Patreon, and it'll be day to day. I'm going to try to figure out, but that way, if you want to recap on the case, I'll do it there as well. With that, again, special shout out to my mods. God bless you guys. And thank you to everybody being respectful in the chat. With that, we'll do a quick little outro, and we'll be back probably same time. We'll probably do like a noon to 3, noon to 4. Kind of depends on how information comes out. And then I'm just gonna basically do the same thing. Just kind of, put the testimony with video, audio, or video. Along with the witness statements. So, all right, guys, we'll see you tomorrow. Much love.